Happy New Comic Book Day, sir.
Oh yeah, Happy New Comic Book Day. Yeah. Are you
Do you
gonna go
have
to
a
the
do you have a local comic book shop that you go to?
Yeah, there's two out here that I go to. What's fun is that the main one that's closest to me, they for the most part don't know it's me. And I don't tell them. I've had two instances where an employee has figured it out because one time I was there and there was a manager because it's part of a chain, and so one of the managers saw me and he knows me and he was just like, "Oh my god, can you?" He saw me and was like, "Hey, let's do a signing. Like he knows I live here and they're always trying to get me to do signings," and I'm like, "No," and he was like, "I have a stack of Energon Universe books. Can you sign them?" And I was like, "Yeah." And one of the employees saw that, and I could tell that guy was like, "You're in here every Wednesday." How did I not know? There was one time a few years ago where I was buying something because a lot of times I'm with my kids, and so that's part of why I'm like incognito, just get in, get the comics, get out, let the kids shop around. But somebody in line to buy comics saw me and like made a beeline to me and was like, "Can you sign these books?" It was like when the Rogues was coming out. And then the employee was like, "Wait, what?" And then he was like, "Can you sign this book for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." But for the most part, yeah, there's two shops. There's literally one that's down the street. It's like a 10-minute drive down the street. And that's the one that I go to where, yeah, incognito, I just go in, get the books, get out, and let my kids shop and stuff. But I don't, it's good because they don't know it's me. So if there's two employees and I hear them talking about comics, they're going to be more open about it. And I can actually hear probably their real takes on things. You know, you hear them actually talking about what came out that day and stuff. And then they recommend things to me. They've even recommended my own work to me, which is funny. So it's like it's just interesting to hear sort of their takes on stuff. Anyway, sorry, long answer for a short question, but yeah,
No, it's that's the whole reason why we're here is New Comic Book Day. I mean, like that's
yeah,
literally like the whole reason why I'm talking to you is like New Comic Book Day and what happens from New Comic Day. But
yeah,
okay, so the Energon universe, the Transformer side is pretty intense, where like
yeah,
Daniel Warren Johnson is like slaughtering people left and right. You
yeah,
know, um,
yeah.
so is there with GI Joe? Is there like a rating system, or are we? Or like, I'm trying to like see
You
the
mean like
spectrum of where.
you mean like are we PG-13?
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Okay.
I think I don't know what the actual rating is. It might be like teen plus or something like that. But I always look at it as like I try to live in that like 80s version of PG-13. Like I always try to walk that line. You know, it's like sometimes I cross into the R rated because even when I was doing Nail Biter was definitely a little more on the R side, but we could probably get away with a bit. You know, we were definitely considered mature. We had the M on the back of the books, but yeah, we definitely try to live into that space. And Daniel, you know, it's different. It's funny with these kinds of rules because it's like when you're slaughtering robots. You know, it's like you got Energon flying in the air, or you know, it's not like it's not as bad, I guess. But when we did things like with Cobra Commander, in the Cobra Commander book, I feel like we definitely walked that line really tight. You know, like in issue 3 with Cobra Commander being tortured by the Dreadnoks, and then you know the stuff with Nemesis Immortal ripping his own skin off and then attacking them. It's like we were definitely like right on that line of PG-13, like which again, that's kind of where I feel like I live in that space. That's my preferred age rating. You know, it's been tough at DC at times. Like even when I was doing Robin, it was like about a death tournament. You know, there were times I was like coming a little bit too close. But yeah, yeah. But Daniel kills a lot, dude. It's so funny. I don't even. I was actually asking them last week if they could give me a list of every character he's killed so far, every transfer he's killed so far. Because there's times where it's like, you know, I need to just make sure I'm on top of that stuff whenever we reference it.
You know, after New York Comic Con, I was thinking about Risk, and you showed
Yeah.
they showed like the profile card of him, and there was
Mm-hmm.
like a giant American eagle, and in
Yeah.
my head I was like, oh, that would be a cool modernization of Spirit.
Yeah. You know, it was funny. I was wondering about that too when Tom, because we had some different ideas for a risk. We went back and forth on him a little bit. Like we just knew we wanted him to wear the suit and tie and look different from everybody else. You know, we didn't want it to be a generic Joe character. And we were like, let's be different. Um, Tom added the tattoo. And I was totally cool with it. And I liked the belt buckle, and I felt like it kind of added some more flair to him. But then I did have that exact same impulse. I was like, oh, he looks a little bit like. But that's the thing. I was like, I don't want anyone to think he's Spirit. And if we do, like, this is a thing. We kind of have a history of this. Like, we are not changing into the characters so drastically that they're unrecognizable. Like, you would 100% be like, when we do introduce Spirit, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's Spirit. You know?
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering, like, because he's kind of like, I mean, I love Spirit, and like the cartoon was amazing, and all the stuff that him with Storm Shadow, like, there's so much amazing good stuff with that. But like,
There
also
is.
like, he's still kind of like a Village People kind of character.
Well, it's funny, yeah, because I have his figure up here, and like he's one of my favorites too. Like I have my, I like the ones that always have a little bit of, they just look different. So it's like him and Chuckles and Shipwreck. You know, they have that kind of vibe to them. And yeah, with Spirit, I've thought about Spirit a bit and kind of his history of things, but it's interesting because it's like, you know, it's the same sort of weird rule of like when I'm introducing these characters, I'm not trying to go so far outside the box with them. Like I feel like it's still an organic Energon universe version of them. Like I guess the way I see it is like if you saw them across the room, you would 100% know who they are, right? And so I always try to make sure we keep that in line. And so with him in particular, it's interesting, yeah, because even in the cartoon, like there's a couple episodes with him and Storm Shadow and stuff, and it's like, yeah, there's some really good stuff with him, but I don't know. I've said this a million times. I know what we've talked about, I'm sure, where it's like the patience, you know, trying to be patient, to bring everything in, you know, and it's like I have this plan that goes out years, and it's funny to see like which characters get brought in when and how long it's going to be with some characters. So yeah, it'll be a bit before we get to some of that. I think one of the rules we've had is that we don't want to just be straight up GI Joe. Like, and what I mean by that is that like, you know, for lack of a better phrase, I know we've said this before, but it's like we're looking at this like ultimate GI Joe. Like this is about how GI Joe got built, and we're still kind of in that space where it's like the team is small, and then we're going to introduce new characters, and you're going to see a lot of these little conflicts we've kind of been teasing anyway. But I don't want to have a situation where it just looks like the same as what Lara Hama's doing in Real American Hero, you know? So it's like it's going to just take time to get to some of those characters and make sure we're doing it again like the Energon universe way. But yeah, it's rough sometimes because I want to play with all of them.
One of the amazing things about this book is like the color palettes used.
Oh yeah, Jordy. Yeah,
Jordy is like, I mean, hands down my favorite person in the world when it comes to coloring comic books. How are you involved in that?
I mean, you know, Jordy and I will email each other, and we have sort of like a good back and forth over email and stuff. She also lives here in Portland. And so we'll have little bits of emails back and forth about things. But for the most part, you know, she knows it, and like her and Tom talk. And it's like, I think at this point we with Duke, we established in the first issue the look of the book really early on. And so once we establish little stuff, you know, it's like, and I guess I don't want to say the rules, but there are certain like visual cues, you know. So it's like if red is in a scene, that means danger is coming, or there's something, you know, dangerous happening. And so that is something we've already kind of set up. And so she just kind of runs, and then we get the colors, and you know, I pass along any notes, but usually like I was looking at some colors this morning, and I was like, I have one note, and it was a continuity thing. You know, it wasn't even a style thing because Jordy is amazing. Like she's really, really an amazing colorist, you know, and it's like she really adds to the story, you know, like it adds the story, the tone, the flow. Like, you know, her and Tom are an amazing team. So with her, it's really just, I mean, at this point, you know, after the first issue, it's been much more like just keeping things consistent and just being like, if I ever catch something that I'm like, oh, you know, we did this before. That's really been it, you know. It's like
because like Risk, like when Risk gets introduced, it's like this purple and yellow bouncing back and forth, and I was like, what was that conversation like?
So basically, because at one point she wanted it to be, it was yellow and blue, and I was like, well, blue is used so much in the issue in relation to Cobra having the Energon guns, and so because of Energon guns, I was like, well, keep that blue to those scenes. And then in this one, I was the one that was like, we'll make it purple. Her idea was that in that scene, it's a nightclub and the lights are flashing in the nightclub,
Oh,
like
awesome.
strobe effect. So she was like, "What if I did that?" And I was like, "I'm down for that because it also adds something very different from the rest of the issue." It's like, and again, like it's almost like she gives certain elements their own color. So again, it's like, okay, if red is coming or danger is coming, things are red. Anytime Energon guns are in the scenes, it's a lot of blue. It's like, and Duke has his own kind of thing, and then she adds this sort of gritty layer to everything that gives it sort of this I don't want to say older feel, but there is something rough around the edges to it that just really works, and it separates it visually. And I think that's actually a major part of why Duke and this book have been so successful. It really is just, it looks so different from what you would expect from a G.I. Joe book. It really helps give the Energon universe its own identity.
Yeah, I really wish I can come up with a better word to it, but when I'm describing it in reviews, I call it kind of like an Instagram filter because that's like kind of the what it
No, I
kind of
get exactly.
represents.
Yeah. I get exactly what you're saying.
But I know it's way more work than just clicking a button and doing that, and so I feel really bad when I say that.
No, I mean, I'm really lucky with this book because it's like her and Tom are so incredibly thoughtful. It's like I always strive for that in my own work, and I see it in comics. You can tell when people are just like moving so quickly, they're not putting that extra bit of thoughtfulness into it, and that's really what I'm always looking at. It's like I can read a comic, I can tell when it's a first pass, and it's like with this, those like the two of them, they're really thoughtful about every little thing they do. And Tom, it's like every page, he's really thinking about how to tell the story the best, how to be dynamic, how to be unique. And, it's like, and it helps me too, because then it makes me start leaning into that as well. Like, okay, because one of the things I think about a lot with comics, I talk about this with other writers. Like I was just talking about with Tom King the other day, not a name drop, but it's like one of my best friends. All the time, so I feel like it's okay. But we talk about this a lot of like, it's not just about the story you're telling, it's how you tell it. And I think that sometimes gets lost in comics. People forget the how you tell it part. They just tell you a story. They just try to shove it all in 22 pages. And so I think a lot about how am I going to tell you the story? Like, how am I going to relay it? And sometimes that's the fun part of like sitting down and being like, okay, what am I going to do different with this issue to tell this story? And Tom and Jordy also think that way. And you can see it. Like, that's an example where it was like, when we got to the risk scene, Jordy was like, okay, let's tell this a little differently. Let's have the strobing lights. Let's have the purple and yellow.
Let's talk about everybody. You got Russ Wooten as your letterer.
Oh yeah, I've worked with Russ for a long time. He lettered Ghosted with me. He lettered every issue of Ghosted way back in the day, which is one of my earlier Image Skybound. It was my first Skybound book actually. And so I've always really liked his work. And so when it was suggested he was going to do this, I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And but he's the same thing. He just gets it too,
Yeah. Well, there was a conversation. I think Nate Picos was having a conversation on Twitter about like how writers are kind of, and it was just more of a generalization about how writers kind of just be like, oh, a boulder's falling, and they don't add the special effects word that they want to use. My question to you is like, you've got all the toys. Like, are you playing with the toys and trying to come up with the special effects word and make your own like little GI Joe?
Yes, but so it's funny. Yes, I do. I was thinking about this morning because there's an issue with G.I. Joe. That was the one I finished this morning, and it had a scene where it was a lot of special effects. I definitely think a lot about special effects when I'm writing, but I also like when the artist thinks about it too, and they'll sometimes just draw it in. Like a lot of special effects you'll see in the book are actually were actually drawn in by Tom. And then people like Russ will come in. And I've been really lucky with this, with like all the letterers I've worked with the last few years, really understanding like how much it can be part of the story. Like I always go back and I look at X-Men comics in the 90s. And there's this one issue of X-Force that Greg Capullo drew that has so much dynamic lettering in it that I always use screen grabs of it, and I will sometimes share that with everybody to be like, this is what I'm talking about, because I like that like really bold, big, like sometimes words will have like it's funny how back in the 90s you would see this thing where like sometimes not just to emphasize a word, not just by bolding it, they would color it differently.
Yeah.
Or you would, when a character gets introduced, I don't just have their name. I like when we use their actual logo. So like in issue 1, there's that part where Destro says Cobra Commander for the first time, and instead of just having him say Cobra Commander, we use the logo from the Cobra Commander book. So it's stuff like that. Like I really love that stuff, and so it's great when people like Russ are also again being thoughtful and being like, how can I kind of, you know, just push the storytelling a bit using lettering? Like all of it just comes around to that, and it's yeah, Russ is great. Russ is hard work because he's been lettering all of these books. Like he letters all the Energon universe books, so it's that dude is definitely working hard.
Another thing about New York Comic Con is they showed the absolute Batman Batmobile. It's just basically a dump truck with some wings and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? G.I. Joe's got way better vehicles than, so like, I can't wait now after they showed that for like Rolling Thunder to come through. Like, what vehicle are you excited to like crash through?
On my iPad, I have 2 tabs that are always open, and one of them is the character file tab or just character information tab, and then one tab is just the vehicles. Because I have a bunch here, you know, I have a bunch of the toys here in my office, and so I always look at the toys and stuff. And so it's the same thing with the characters. It's like, when is the best opportunity to introduce it? It's funny with that splash page of the Batmobile that Dragata drew, because Scott actually texted me 2 versions of it. And they went with the one I was like, you go with that one, dude. Like the really big, crazy one. But yeah, dude, we have some stuff. Like, I feel like we're definitely going to roll out some really cool, big transfer stuff, or big G.I. Joe vehicles as we go. You'll see. It's going to be, you'll see. It's going to get nuts at some point. But again, this is like a smaller, just getting started team. And it's like every time we introduce something new, I always want to make sure it's the biggest it can be. And that includes the vehicles. Originally in that issue of Duke where they found the pit and they drove out with all those vehicles, originally I had a lot more in there, and they were like, slow down, dude. It's like, save some of this for later. And so yeah, like you'll see. Like we'll definitely get some big fun stuff coming.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, dude. Always. I'll catch you the next con, man.